Welcome to Prospecting Purpose, where we explore mining's role in shaping a sustainable, socially just, and brighter future. I'm Liz Friel, your host for the series, with a rotating guest on every episode. Have you found yourself curious about the growing chatter on inclusion, diversity, equity, access? Maybe you're a bit confused by the growing list of terms. How are they related, and what do they mean in the mining context? Where's mining at? What's progressing well, and what do we really need to work on? That's exactly what we're going to focus on today. Joining us on this episode is Jamile Cruz, founder of IND 101, a consulting firm specialized in inclusion and diversity strategies with a focus on mining. Jamile has over 20 years of experience in this industry, with names like Hatch, Vale, and Accenture. Concentrating on the inclusion of underrepresented groups in the industry, she offers a wealth of contextualized knowledge when it comes to developing and implementing diversity strategies. Welcome, Jamile.
Thank you, Liz, for having me here today. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Super to have you on the show. I'm excited to chat a bit about diversity. But before we start, can I ask you, what first got you into the mining industry, and how did you develop this focus on diversity and inclusion specifically?
Well, mining industry was by accident. So part of my work has always been connected very much with capital projects. And in capital projects, there's always that phase of development when we start talking about talent strategies and how we're going to bring people to site. But there wasn't really a lot of discussion around talent strategy. Like, who are these people? How are they going to fit in our culture? How do we place people from our communities? Plus, I'm an immigrant. I'm a Black woman. I'm an engineer. And those things usually don't fit into the same room, I would say. So being the one and only in a lot of the rooms, I felt like there were questions to be addressed.
Yeah.
And one of them, it's like, why was I the only one so many times? And through my work with Accenture, I decided to ask the questions and drive the change.
That's fantastic. And now here we are, and you're running your own company and you're helping the industry get better at this. There's actually some really awesome statistics that I wanted to quote as we start the episode here about the value of diversity for anyone in the audience who doesn't know. For example, over 3/4 of leaders now think that diversity is a competitive advantage. And it's no wonder, because statistically, you're twice as likely to meet or exceed your financial targets. You're 3 times as likely to be high performing as your peers, 6 times more likely to be innovative, and 8 times more likely to achieve just a better business outcome overall. So the business case is basically a no-brainer, and people are starting to hear that. It's the how, I think, that is really the question where a lot gets stuck. So maybe let's dig into clarifying first some confusion around the key terms that we hear a lot in this field, because first we saw the word diversity emerge, then we started hearing about inclusion going mainstream, and more recently we're also hearing the addition of equity and access. So what is the difference between these 4 words, and how do they relate to each other?
I believe we started with diversity because it's the easy one to see, right? When I think diversity, the easiest one to think about is representation. So I want to see myself represented in different places.
Okay.
When we talk about inclusion, we start talking about the cultural aspect. So how people act, how people speak, and how that makes people feel, right? So do I feel included somewhere? Do I feel like I belong here?
Yeah.
The whole idea of equity, there is an understanding that historically some groups are discriminated against, and we need to start changing that perspective. And then access, unfortunately, one of the groups that we discriminate the most against, right, that doesn't have a space in society, are people with disabilities. So when we think about even design of mining organizations, like, is the plant design, is the office designed to include all people? So that's another element. And just going back quickly to the business case conversation, I have to comment on Sarah Kaplan. Sarah Kaplan is the leader from the Gender Economy Institute at University of Toronto. So her last book, which is the 360 Corporation, talks very much about how we have a moral case, a business case, and then the legal case. Everything needs to go kind of in parallel.
Yes.
I do feel, though, as a consultant, that I do get that question quite often too, on debating
What's
on
the business
case.
Yeah.
So what I love to see now, the development of things, is that companies like BHP, who did that commitment to gender balance by 2025, if you go to the Gender Equation, which is their website promoting the information associated to their targets, you can see key KPIs from the industry, which are safety, productivity, culture, being related to the advancement that they're making on gender inclusion.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. You're already rolling right into my next question, which is, let's look at mining specifically on these various subjects. I mean, this whole theme we know is one of our most lagging ESG performance areas, like by far. And I think that's super important because a lot of those benefits we've been talking about, like why diversity and inclusion, there's a good business case, are also areas that we already struggle with as an industry historically. So say, let's start with gender, okay? Because the inclusion of women has probably been our most longstanding diversity focus area. So currently here in Canada, last I checked, women represent just 16% of the mining workforce, and we have the lowest representation of women on boards of any other sector. That includes oil and gas, tech, manufacturing. Why for you do we lag historically so much on this point, even despite efforts?
I usually say that mining goes with the word tradition, and they use tradition to essentially stop innovation. And innovation being one of those things, right? We say innovation, we think technology, but innovation can take many forms. And one of the forms of innovation in talent strategy would be include more people and include different people than your traditions. I think that culture of this is what we have and this is what we're used to essentially enables the continuation of that culture. So we know, like we joke sometimes when you go to PDAC, for example, that you kind of know everybody. With that idea, people will start giving like jobs to like, we do that, right? That's human nature. You call who you know, you call who you trust, you call people who have same background as you, same education as you. So that is...
Yeah, it's comfortable.
Yeah, it's comfortable. So that's why we need systematic change.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. Of course, it's not all bad. We should recognize that we have made a lot of progress that's worth celebrating, particularly when you read different stories around the world, around the history of mining. We've come a long way. What do you think are some of the greatest successes that we have had in our diversity and inclusion journey as an industry?
I would say the conversations we're having today are not the conversations we're having 5 years ago and definitely not 10 years ago. I think the space that's been created by the indexes coming from investment firms to the actual commitment coming from companies that are ahead of the game, the commitment level has changed. The conversation has had an upgrade. Definitely last year with everything that happened from a social justice perspective, there is even an extra upgrade, right? No longer the discussion's gender only. To me, it's like probably that's the biggest gain of 2020. I know we all suffered with COVID-19 and we're still suffering, but I think changing and shifting the conversation to include more people and to recognize the level of privilege that some groups have has definitely changed the conversation and moving towards action now in a way that I haven't seen before.
Yeah, I wanted to actually ask, I'm glad that you bring that up, about some of the really important social justice and equality movements that we've been experiencing recently. And I wanted to mention Black Lives Matter in particular, because it has brought so much awareness to so many people across countless industries, right? I'm seeing a lot of articles and videos come up online across different industries that are really trying to elevate voices of color. And one thing that I see called out a lot is the issue of company culture and the need to completely rewire company culture at the core. And I wonder if you think that resonates as well for the mining industry. And if we do need to do more of that, what does that actually take?
I think we need to shift everything, to be honest, and culture comes with that, right? It's in everything that we do.
Yeah.
When I think about Black Lives Matter, and everything that people are starting to learn. Like when I get calls from clients now, the conversation is still an educational piece, right? It's about understanding why we're not participating. What are the historical issues that happen? Why are things happening the way they are? So like when we talk about unconscious bias and the basics of understanding like human behavior, we're still on a very, like I usually show a maturity curve and we're still on a very like reactive way. Something happens, we're like, okay, let me research this. Let me learn a little bit more because maybe I'm behind. So I think there's a lot of that. And then there's still a lot of that to work in mining, you have to be tough.
Totally.
I used to hear that a lot, like, oh, you're a woman, but you're here because you're strong or because you can manage this. And I was like, I don't want to be in an industry where I have to operate in a certain way to be able to belong here and participate and grow in this industry. You don't need to be tough to be able to perform well, right?
Yeah, and that'll be a massive shift. Despite a lot of the advances that we've made, let's face it, the industry is still overwhelmingly white, male, and aging. What are some specific types of diversity, in addition to the ongoing focus that we have had on women and certainly need to have, that we still don't think about enough as an industry? For example, race, age, sexual orientation, socioeconomic origin, geography, academic background, these sorts of things.
I love the conversation, so I would start from a good case scenario and a good effort that has been put by mining industry human resource. Actually did a whole effort around immigrants because we know this, right? How many times you took a cab that you're like, oh my gosh, a PhD on chemistry or whatever. So the mining industry is like this very close group of people, this bubble that's it. Once you're in, but it's hard to get in. So when a new professional gets to Canada, even with an amazing resume, with work that they've done in similar plants somewhere else, they do have a very difficult time entering the industry. So one of the questions to be asked of people is, are those requirements real requirements, or are you putting that requirement because you want that specific person to take the job? That's one of the first exercises we do, like put on the job description what you really need versus this wish list that we already know, right? Tons of research shows that men will apply, women will not if they only meet, 60%.
I think the average is if you have a list of 10 things, right? Men will apply when they tick 6 of the 10 boxes, and the average woman who ticks 10 of them still might not apply and doubt herself.
And we don't see research, or we don't have yet research from the other underrepresented groups, but you can imagine, right, the challenge of getting in. I always say, like in mining in Canada, if you're not from Queens, you already start behind, right? So it's true. So, and those are the things that you hear when you're sitting with the big guys, but like we need to start changing. That's not okay. And when we are in the room together with them, that's the whole thing about see something, say something. It's like, why cannot be someone from a different university? So I think asking those honest questions and first writing things that are really required will just open doors for many more people. We go into this concept that things are going to flow and things can be organic. Of Canada is a diverse place. Our talents diverse. So by nature, we're going to get somewhere. The honest truth is that it's not. So when we talk about systematic change, it's for you to start putting the systems, correcting the bias embedded in each system, making a conscious effort and being very intentional about the change that we're doing. But then, we could go into people with disabilities, race, even though we started the conversation last year, I would say it's probably the first year that the conversation actually started happening. Like before, any room that I was invited to talk about inclusion and diversity, if I talked about race, you could see people turning their eyes. They're like, okay, here she comes, right?
Well, and that's why I think it's such an interesting thing to bring up. Why Black Lives Matter has brought so much awareness. Well, what is happening now in mining? Now that we've seen this movement that you can't ignore, it's all over the news, and it's a very real issue in our industry.
Yeah, and the beauty about talking about race the way we started last year, like MAC, for example, right? The Mining Association of Canada put this statement late in December saying we're going to support the fight in the Canadian mining industry to stop sexism and racism. So we had a conversation about like, what does that really mean? Like, how do you do that if the system only allows you to continue to do what we've been doing for 100 years? So we need to start rethinking.
Absolutely. What do you think are some of the most important areas where we have the biggest gaps as an industry, or maybe at the company level?
So leadership commitment, I think it's where it starts, but it's also where it stops. So the whole idea of inclusion diversity being a business priority, to me, it's like the initial conversation, right? I've worked for years on digital transformations and digital strategy for mining. And I remember coming with a team of consultants, and they're ready to have us discussing, okay, this is how you implement AI into your project. This is how you implement drones. But then when we talk about inclusion diversity, they're like, yeah, but I assign someone part-time from HR and this person's going to figure out. I was like, how? So like the level of investment and the concept of what a business priority is, like if you're saying it's a business priority, where is the allocation of resource? Who is the executive sponsor for this project? How are you going to do it? Do you have a strategy? Do you have a plan? And those things, unfortunately, are not there yet.
Yeah. And that makes me think of the metrics piece as well, right? And I mentioned before, we know that this is one of our lagging ESG issues. We know that because of metrics.
Yeah. I would say this is the beautiful thing about being an engineer moving into inclusion diversity. I love
You're
data.
like, yay, numbers.
I was like, where are your numbers? And you would be surprised by the number of people who make statements like, I think we're okay, or we're inclusive over here. There are women in our organization. Like, look around, we're diverse. It's like, okay, there's one, right? And we have research that shows this, like that.
Right.
From an image perspective and a perception perspective, when there's one or two women on the board, for example, the perception is that there's more. I'm still so shocked by the number of companies who don't do the basics.
Yeah.
We're doing this whole project with Women in Mining Brazil. And one of the beautiful things of putting like an industry-wide project and set indicators with the approval or with the validation and agreement from the companies themselves is that they're agreeing to start tracking. And then once you start seeing those numbers, it's so much easier to create the actions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you were to advise a mining company, what are some other indicators that they could be pulling in to better understand where they're at and how they're doing and progress over time?
Yeah, so 3 big ones: hiring, promotion, and retention. So people usually focus right away on hiring, right? So they're going to start showing their metrics, like we hired this many percentage of women and racialized people, and this is what we're doing. But then promotion starts kind of fading. Did you look into the pipeline, how that pipeline was formed, right? So you need to start going into every layer. And the big one is retention. Like, it's impressive how many people don't look at turnover numbers with lenses of diversity and inclusion. So you need to look into who is leaving. And another big one is really the complaints. I'm always impressed when companies come along and it's like, oh, we have no complaints or 2 complaints last year. It's like
that means your mechanism's not working.
Yeah, you're a company with 10,000 people and you think only 2 people had issues.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. So true. Let's shift a bit more, looking to the future around some technology stuff, because I know you've also worked in digital transformation. So I feel like you're probably a bit on the ball on this one. Do you know about some technological applications specifically for diversity and inclusion purposes that the industry might expect to be commercialized and mainstreamed in the next few years that could really help?
I think there's a lot of them around the recruiting piece. We're seeing more.
So would that be like the bias elimination piece?
The bias elimination. So there are a few applications. There are some that will work directly with the resume. There are some that will work on the interview cycle to help you define questions. I see a lot of like VR and AI work going towards that direction on helping you having experiences that maybe other underrepresented groups that you don't necessarily understand their world, and you can kind of step into their world. So as a person of color for a day or for that meeting, and then really realize how that feels.
Very cool. I like that a lot. Fascinating. Cool. So what are some of the things that you think we often still get wrong in this industry, even when we have the best of intentions? Like what are we often missing in our approach?
So one of the things that companies need to do is to open up. I think we need to start being more inclusive on the conversation as well. If you don't create a space where people feel comfortable to ask the questions that they have in their heads and how we can move along this curve together, like we get better when we work together, right?
Right. That theme keeps coming up a lot on so many different subjects about all that can be gained if we would just open up and get really honest about our pain points and what's hard, because that's the starting place of things getting better.
And another big one, we need to like get together and really look at in the industry, look at what we're doing and the image that we're sending about the industry externally. Are we having an industry that's attractive to people to join? And like, what is that going to be in the future? So like, I think we would need to work together very strongly to make it charming again. If you're going to go to a Waterloo or whoever university you pick and say, hey, I want the super smart kids who are doing technology to come work for mining, but you're competing with the technology companies or with the management consulting firms, like you're not going to win, right?
Right.
Essentially, when you ask engineering students who they want to work for, mining doesn't show. So
how do you think that we can change that?
I think we need to work together on ESG for sure. And let's have a long-term plan. I feel like we're still working in a reaction way. So like if we have a problem today, let's fix this problem today. But no, let's look at the industry 10 years from now. How do you entertain the students in a way that they're excited about working in mining? And to me, once I started working mining, I'm still excited about mining because as an engineer, you get to do so many things.
So then what would your advice be to a non-traditional mining candidate? What would your advice be to them?
I would say try it. Like I was like I didn't expect to work in mining. As I said, like I fell into it, and sometimes it's hard, but we're here to change, right? And if you look at my resume, look at all the different things that I've done by having a career in mining, from management consulting to engineering to community relationship, like I've done a lot.
Yeah, 100%. I really wish that more young people knew about the industry and found it interesting, because I fell into it too, and I'm so glad that I did. So Jamila, when you think about the future of diversity and inclusion in the mining industry, what are you afraid of and what are you most excited about?
I'm afraid of us losing the steam. Like it feels like it's a huge momentum for us now. So like the work that I'm doing in Brazil, the work that I'm doing in Canada, it feels like the space has been created and people are engaging with the team and wanting to learn and make changes. I'm excited about the work that we can create. Like I think the moment we start opening spaces, we don't know what we're capable to do, right? So like once we get to a place where the cultures are really welcoming and allowing people to be who they want to be, I think innovation and everything else that we're discussing here and our relationship with society as a whole will change completely, and we're going to be in a better space.
It's so hopeful. I love it. So you know the show is called Prospecting Purpose. I want to ask you what purpose means to you in the context of diversity, inclusion, this mining industry, and trying to build a better future.
I had that question going in my head for so long. So I operated in this space as an engineer, as kind of a business operator, and then as a management consultant. But there was always something in the back of my head on like, what else, right? Like, what can you do to really make changes? And I think figuring out how to use your voice and connecting with people in a way that you actually make a difference, to me has been like, it's been the most amazing thing that I've done, talking about something so vulnerable and personal to really connecting with leaders and then starting seeing them speaking up and making the changes themselves, to me has been just amazing. So hopefully I will be able to continue to do that.
Beautiful. Well, that's all for today's episode. This is Liz Friel on Prospecting Purpose. Thanks for joining us. And thank you so much, Jamila, for being my co-host today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Hopefully we're going to do this again soon.
If you want to learn more, check out the show notes for links on all that we covered today. See you next time.